everyone, it's LadyJenevia. Today I want to talk about a new Netflix series called Cursed. I have binged the entire season twice now, and as you can probably guess by the title, I loved it. I was really looking forward to this coming out because I love a good medieval fantasy, and I love when new artists get handed a big old pile of money in order to reimagine stories surrounding the Arthurian legends. I loved BBC's Merlin back in the day, and I'm still emotionally traumatized from that. I also really loved King Arthur, Legend of the Sword, and if you did not support that one, well then you should be ashamed of yourself, because Guy Ritchie had an entire 6-film series planned out, and now we will never get to see whatever it was that he was concocting in that brilliant mind of his. The most recent addition to those Arthurian legends is, of course, Cursed on Netflix. I'm going to first give an introduction to the series that will be more spoiler-free on the offhand chance that you are someone that is clicking on this video and has not already watched the series and you would like to get a feel for what is going on with it, and then I will be jumping into more detailed feedback about the characters, their arcs, and at that point I will be getting into all of the spoilers. I will be warning you beforehand before I get into those spoilers, so you will have the option to click off. However, I do feel strongly that this is a series that is better enjoyed unspoiled, since that is how I watched it for the first time. Don't even look it up on Wikipedia, because there are spoilers there that were not there when I first started watching it. Another general piece of feedback that I will give is that the show definitely picks up more momentum as you make your way through more of the episodes. So if you are tuning into the first episode expecting everything to be kicking off, you might not be quite satisfied, but I can assure you that things continue to escalate as the series progresses in a way that I found really enjoyable. By the time I got to the end of this series, I felt like I was in it, I was invested, I was gripped, I wanted more. So, Netflix, you are not watching this, but I will address you nonetheless. Please renew Cursed for season 2. As is customary with an epic and magical medieval series like this in the fantasy genre, we are first introduced to the various factions that are fighting each other for power in this world, and other applicable lore about things like magic, the creatures, and other facets of the world building. In Cursed, we have the Fae, which is the term for any and all types of magical people. All things considered, they did a decent job in showing variety among the Fae. They're definitely not a monolith to the audience, but they do represent the other in the larger theme of Fear of the Other, and I do have a soft spot for Fear of the Other being used in genres like fantasy and sci-fi. I also really love the way the show draws on a lot of historical references to tell this story. It's very much a fictional world that you can immerse yourself in, but if you are familiar with certain darker chapters of human history, there's a lot of extra dimensions that you can appreciate. The Red Paladins, which are the religious zealots in the story, are very much a reference to things like the Crusades, and there are also some nice nods to the Salem witch trials. When you get into the Arthurian legends that are often presented in works of fiction that we consume for entertainment, a lot of it consists of stuff that has been embellished over hundreds of years for entertainment value. It is by no means a historical canon, but things like the Salem witch trials were very real. Witches are not real, but those trials were about very real things like the oppression of women, religious tyranny. And the thing that really interested me in Cursed was when they had this reference to not being able to practice Fey medicine without fear of persecution. Mind you, these are remedies that actually work, because the people with power thought that prayer would heal the guy with a wicked injury. That was a straight up Salem reference. Women practicing medicine back in the day would get accused of practicing witchcraft. I like these historical references and all the allegories to real world issues, both historical and contemporary, because it grounds the show in a way that allowed the material to better resonate with me as a viewer. I didn't find any of that to be heavy-handed or ham-fisted in its delivery. And another part that I liked was the part of the story with the royals, the way the queen was acting as a puppet master, because the infrastructure of that high society was such that women are not allowed to outright hold that power, so she has to use this prince as a means of exerting her control. It's ironic that so many of these humans in the show preach about being above the fae folk when they won't even let women rule in positions of power, but then the fae folk have no problem accepting a woman, Nimue, as their queen once she starts showing herself to be someone that is capable and willing to take on that challenge. There are many things I enjoy about the writing in this series, including the constant shifting of political alliances between these different factions. It's not just the Fae, the royalty, and religious groups like the Red Paladin navigating these precarious relationships with one another either. There is also Cumber, King of the North, who is trying to make a play for the throne as well. I have a feeling that this is something that will be developed more in season 2, presuming that the show gets renewed, of course. And I really do hope that it gets renewed because there is so much more to explore with these characters and the ongoing clashes between these different factions. One of the parts of the series that I would really like to give more credit to is anything and everything involved with all of the areas to do with production design and other elements of the visual world building. Anyone that worked on building sets, gathering or building props, creating the costumes, doing the hair and makeup, all of these parts are something that I really love, and I think sometimes these jobs end up being thankless labor in a way. It's a little bit like VFX where people don't necessarily take the time to talk about it as much unless it looks bad. All of these jobs are crucial to the world building and making the viewing experience an immersive one. And I definitely felt like I got sucked into the show because of the writing, but also because of all of the visual parts to make things feel real. And of course, the characters themselves and their journeys across these 10 episodes. I don't think there's a whole lot more that I can say about the characters without spoilers because I have a lot of opinions about these characters, but I don't really want to stifle my opinions for the sake of navigating my way around not spoiling things. So hopefully, if you have not already watched the show, I have convinced you to give it a shot because after all, it's only 10 episodes and there is a decent chance that you are someone that is spending a lot more time indoors. So perhaps you can spend some of that time watching Cursed and post about it on social media so more people watch it because I really want a season 2. I'm not going to be covering everything in detail because I already know that this video will be very long because I have a tendency to waffle about the things that I love, but if you are as interested in this series as I am, do let me know because I have some ideas for possibly revisiting the show and doing some more in-depth video essays about more specific topics or aspects of the series, and I'm definitely open to doing some of those after I finish my video essay review series on The Boys. Now, let's get into spoilers. Obviously, when it comes to character discussions, we should start with Nimue. I really enjoyed her journey both as the protagonist and the hero of the story, but I also enjoyed how there were so many dimensions to her story. On the one hand, she has all of this baggage from being ostracized as the other within the other. Even though she has grown up in a Fae community, they do not accept her. They harbor a lot of fear and suspicion towards her, which means that as she matures, she can either lash out from having that pain, or she can learn from those experiences and have more empathy for others. I was doing a bit of Googling, and apparently Nimue is based on the Lady of the Lake, who has often existed as a character that serves Arthur's story in more traditional tellings of these legends. I thought that this was a great way to reimagine the story and use these characters and also let women have their fair share of the spotlight. Now, don't get me wrong, I have had a great time with the more traditional Arthurian stories. I mentioned Merlin and King Arthur, Legend of the Sword for a reason, but there are not as many women in those stories compared to the male characters that get to go on these really cool epic journeys, adventures, and all these trials and tribulations. I really liked the way that they explored Nimue's parentage. I figured out pretty early on that Merlin was her father. When they finally got to the episode where they were going to meet, I kept yelling at the screen, "Because he's your father! Merlin, you are the father!" Their stories fit really well together because on the one hand, you got to see how her mother's love was a crucial part of her development, but as she's getting to learn about her real father, she is also getting to learn about herself and this new side of her that is coming out out now that she has this very powerful magical sword. There's this recurring theme of power and how it can be seductive and corrupt people, and that is definitely a massive part of Nimue's journey, and it comes up a lot in the other groups in this world. Their battles with each other are largely about wanting more power and wanting to rule over others. I like that the sword works as something that can be both literal and symbolic in the story. Being that it is a fantasy series, the sword is magical and it can mess with the people who wield it, but if you remove the whole magical aspect of the show, you can still tell a very similar story about how, as Nimue is rising up to be this leader of the Fae, she has to struggle with making very difficult decisions that come with being in this position of power. I really loved that they had that parallel of her cutting the hand off of that human man that attacked her and Arthur near the beginning of the series, right after she had gotten the sword. And then again, much later on in the series, she cuts off the hands of the Tusk Man, I believe is what they're called, one of the Fae people that was enacting violence against humans, which was going directly against not only her orders, but this idyllic paradise that she was trying to achieve of Fae and humans peacefully cohabitating. It's not necessarily clear as to whether or not that was the right decision. It's certainly an extreme one, but it's those ethical dilemmas that make the show more interesting. It's not easy for her to be a hero and do the right thing because she gets put into these really difficult situations where no matter what decisions she makes, there will be consequences. Now, hopefully I explained that well enough, but definitely let me know if you want me to write up some more organized thoughts just about her character journey, because like I said, I'm definitely open to revisiting this series in future video essays. This is more of a preliminary reaction / review to the material. Arthur was also great. It's a very interesting, refreshing take on the character because a lot of times Arthur is the main protagonist, or one of them anyway, and he goes on this journey where he gets to become king because he's either born into nobility or he becomes a hero because he found Excalibur and pulled it out of the stone. And I love that in this series, he's just a person. There's no nepotism granting him access to be a hero. He is flawed, he has made mistakes, and he's had a very difficult time with life, but he is still able to persevere and find worth in himself by helping others and also helping this larger cause of saving the Fae. One of my favorite scenes of his is when he is talking to Morgana and he is apologizing for not being able to save her when he was younger, but he's also bearing his soul because he was just a child when he had all of his father's debts dumped on him, and realistically, what was he supposed to do? However, he's still a good, kind person, so he's been grappling with the guilt of everything that happened for all of these years. And I was really enjoying the budding romance between Nimue and Arthur. But then when Gawain arrived and they had that shot where he's removing his helmet, but the helmet was being removed very slowly, so I immediately yelled at my screen, "Oh no, not a love triangle." This is actually the only noteworthy critique that I have of the show, but don't misunderstand me because I still love Cursed and I want more people to watch it and I want a season 2. But just in general, I am very over love triangles. It is not 2008 anymore. I am well aware of the fact that we are in a Twilight Renaissance and I am here for all of that, but we don't need any more love triangles. And I'm glad that they didn't actually go down that path, but even just the insinuation that it was going there bothered me. And then the fact that they had Arthur ask Gawain if he was into Nimue and would be a rival suitor to her affections right before they were about to fight a battle in which they might die, that was stupid. I'm sorry, it just was stupid. That was just you trying to pander to tween shippers that will make edits and give you free marketing when the show is already good enough on its own. You don't need to do all of that. Now let's talk about Morgana. I also really liked her. When Nimue was spying on her at the very beginning of their introduction to each other, when they're still at the Abbey, and Morgana was talking to Celia, and their faces were about this far apart from each other, I went, lesbians? And I was waiting. I was gripped. I was waiting for that confirmation. Do you know how excited I was that the show went, You're getting female leads, you're getting black leads, you're getting lesbian leads. You're welcome. And all of that was just in the first 3 episodes. Now, what I will say about her relationship with Celia is that we have to acknowledge the elephant in the room, which is the whole issue of the bury your gays trope. Is this a case of 1 step forward and 1 step back? I'm not entirely sure. I'm definitely not going to invalidate anyone's feelings if they feel betrayed by having Celia not survive that demon, Iris burning down the Abbey. But what I will say is that all of these heroes are being haunted in their own way by the ghosts of their loved ones. Nimue has her dead mother, Arthur has his dead father, and Morgana has her dead girlfriend. I think that if we are going to talk about how Morgana's story relates to tropes in regards to representation, it is important to remember that full context of the show and what all of the lead characters are going through. I was more so horrified when Celia's ghost self showed up and fed Morgana a spider. Listen, I am fully sympathetic to any girls in fiction tragically losing their girlfriends, but no matter how much you loved her, if she comes back and feeds you a demonic spider, you have full permission to move the hell on and find a new, better girlfriend. Of all the violence on this show, that was the moment that really skeeved me out more than almost anything else. I love that Morgana was the one to create the Fae Underground. That was another nice historical Easter egg, and I'm very curious to see how her story will continue now that she has obtained magical powers, because we've seen that the show is taking a lot of creative liberties. We're focusing on the Lady of the Lake instead of making her just an aid to Arthur's story. Arthur isn't noble born. From what we can tell, he's not even related to Uther Pendragon in this canon, unless we are going to have some sort of family twist down the line, which I would be quite interested to see. It wouldn't be impossible since Uther isn't actually noble born in this story. But as for Morgana, she is often a villain in more traditional canon, but it would be really cool if they were to subvert from that and not make her a villain. I'm totally on board with them keeping her in a morally gray area and struggling with her powers the same way Nimue struggled with the ethics of managing that significant power from the sword and being the Fae Queen. I really loved Merlin, by the way. I didn't know if I would be into him when the series first started, but by the end, I was so emotionally invested in his tormented struggle. I really bought into his emotions about being a new father and trying really hard to do what's best for his daughter, but so much of what's happening is beyond his control, particularly since he was operating without his magic for the majority of the season. I'm curious what everyone else's theory was, but I had initially thought when I was watching it for the first time that perhaps his magic had been transferred to Nimue, since he kind of seemed to lose it not long after he had hooked up with her mom, but it also could have something to do with having that sword pulled out of him instead. That was certainly interesting to watch. Still, I really like that parallel of Nimue telling him that channeling love was what helped her to summon her magic, and then when Merlin lost Nimue, that was when he was finally able to regain his magic. And it's this combination of him feeling love but also anger, since he seems to have a lot of anger in general. So his reconnection to his magic is unique to him, but it also still has that nod to his blossoming relationship with Nimue. Since I briefly mentioned the nobles, I will say that when I first saw King Uther introduced in this series, I looked at him suspiciously because he looked really familiar. And then it clicked. That actor played Patrick in the BBC series Gold Digger, which I hated. That show was terrible. I made a whole video about it, by the way, which you are free to watch if you have not done so already. That's no disrespect to him as an actor, though. I just really hated the writing in that series and more or less every character that was in it. It's a very unique experience to watch a show where you dislike 99% of the characters. That was an experience, to say the least. I'm very intrigued about how Uther will develop as a character, since he has now cut the cord, if you'll pardon the expression. But there is so much fighting going on with these different groups, and I'm just curious to see how he will cope now that he not only doesn't have his mom, but he doesn't really seem to have any allies either, from what I can tell, unless they are going to introduce new leaders of other places that we just haven't seen yet in season 1. The religious sector of the show seems to be allying with the leader of the North. Maybe those alliances will switch around again, but I can't tell. I need a season 2. Moving back to the Fae, I definitely want to make sure that I give Pym her flowers. I really thought at the beginning of the series that she was just going to get killed off to further Nimue's angst, and I ended up finding it really refreshing that a character like her got to have her own journey. And I was genuinely sad when her himbo, Doff, died. I can't believe she didn't even get to hook up with him. They didn't even kiss. It was cool, though, to see a character like her step so far outside of their comfort zone to try to be free and also get back to Nimue. Honestly, get you a friend like Pym. And I would really like to see what they will do with her next, unless she gets killed off for season 2 angst. The show really did not shy away from that type of angst. A lot of people died, but I was kind of into it. Do you want to know the one that really got me? I think his name was Mogwan, the young fae that wanted Arthur to train him to fight. I thought right away that he was going to get killed off at some point, but I thought that they would keep him around for longer before they did it. I thought that Arthur would at least be able to train him a little, and then they would go into battle, and Mogwan would end up sacrificing himself in order to save Arthur against a red paladin or something. But nope, Arthur agrees to train him, and boom, arrow in the neck. Wow. Iris was an unexpectedly compelling villain. Make no mistake, I didn't like her character at all, but that wasn't the point of the character. You're not supposed to like her. She was supposed to embody this whole idea of being a zealot to such an extremity that you will sell your soul for whatever dogma you have latched onto and sell anyone and everyone else out in the process. It was actually very impressive how formidable a foe she ended up becoming. They built her up in a really effective way, so she ended up being far more of a threat to Nimue than a lot of these other big bads we met throughout the entire season. And now she's all set to be an even bigger threat in the next season. Netflix, please renew the show. There is one more character we have to talk about today, and if you know me, it should not surprise you that I would save them for last. And again, if you've been naughty and watched this far in this video without watching the show first, please click off because we are going to get into major spoilers right now. Maybe I am very predictable, but when all was said and done, my favorite character ended up being the Weeping Monk. You know I love a good villain. If you watched my DCEU film tier list I just posted recently, you will have heard me say that, 5 times, 10 times, I love a good villain. When I first started the series, I wasn't sure if Daniel Sharman was going to be a convincing villain. That is no disrespect intended to him. It's just that Teen Wolf is still deeply burned into my mind. So when I see Daniel Sharman, I see a cute, wholesome puppy. So the show first starts and I'm thinking, okay, this look is a serve. I might have been skeptical about him as a villain, but that oversized hood and smudgy eye makeup is doing at least 40% of the work right now. So I figured out very quickly that the Weeping Monk was magical because he knew that code phrase that the Fae used, born in the dawn to pass in the twilight. That was how he lured Percival out of hiding. Now, they didn't show him using any blatant displays of magical powers, but to me, the uncanny ability to track Fae folk combined with the fact that he knew their secret phrase that no one else in the religious group ever displayed knowledge of was enough of a giveaway to me that he was in fact magical. So it did not surprise me when he was fighting Gawain and then his hand turned all leafy when it touched nature. At first when I saw that, I had thought that maybe he was supposed to be the little boy that they showed in the very beginning of the series back in episode 1, and that maybe that had been a sort of flashback that they didn't tell us was a flashback. But then when I went and rewatched the show from the very beginning, that little boy was a ginger. Now, Daniel Sharman may be many things, but a ginger he is not. So, right now, I think that little boy was just another victim to the Red Paladins, and that they used him as an example to give the Weeping Monk more context when they revealed in more explicit terms that he's magical, even though I already knew he was magical. So when they had the Weeping Monk being all mysterious and menacing, I was getting increasingly more impressed, like, wow, Daniel Sharman is really serving me a menacing villain right now. You better work, puppy. But then the more they were going, I thought to myself, this is the Arthurian world. So yes, it's being reimagined, but we've got a lot of the main characters that we usually see when these legends are being used to create a story. We've already got Arthur, Morgana, Merlin, Gwen. So I started thinking that the Weeping Monk was a significant character too. So for about 80 to 85% of the show, I was convinced that the Weeping Monk was actually Mordred, because to me, that made sense, since he was clearly someone who was magical but was hiding it, and Mordred was always a big foe to Arthur. However, once he beat Gwen and then visited him after he had been tortured, I immediately went, oh my god, he's not the villain, he's an anti-hero. And I got so excited because I really did not see that coming. And that's the type of character material that I love. He's tormented, he's full of angst, there's so many dimensions to him. He was kidnapped as a child, indoctrinated by religious zealots, and he's becoming all conflicted about his ideology because he's growing a conscience, and you get to dig into those layers of his character. So then when the Weeping Monk told Gwen, I've never hurt children, and then a couple scenes later, Percival showed up to try to break Gwen out, I immediately knew, oh my god, Percival is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back and make the Weeping Monk go, enough is enough, and he's gonna leave the Red Paladins. And I got really excited to watch it all happen. So then we got to episode 10, and they finally revealed him without the cloak on, and my jaw dropped. I gasped out loud when they showed his back. Also, his head. I was horrified, my stomach rolled, and I went, wow, I am gripped. I am so invested in this series. And then he had his whole showdown with those creepy masked people. I really thought he was going to die, since the show wasn't anywhere near as predictable as I thought it would be. Like when I thought Pym would die at the beginning, but then she didn't. And then Doff died, and I didn't necessarily think that that would happen until it got closer to it, and I went, oh yeah, no, he's done for. And Mogwen died way sooner than I thought he would. So when the Weeping Monk was getting overwhelmed and bested in the fight, I thought, wow, he's going to go out swinging, having found redemption in his final moments. And this is what I was thinking in the heat of the moment. But then little Percival came through and kept fighting and saved the Weeping Monk the way the Weeping Monk saved Percival. He inspired him to get back up and keep fighting. I am so impressed, by the way, with how they handled Percival. I did not expect him to be as prominent a character as he ended up being. I love the consistency he has, that he is scrappy. He does not care that he is a small child and that the odds are against him in a fight. He will still call you ugly and try to fight you, even though he has no chance. Then when they got to that scene when the episode was almost over, where they were having the Weeping Monk ask Percival what his real name was, and then Percival asked him what his name was, and I went, oh shoot, that's right, they still haven't revealed his name. And I had gotten so swept up in the moment of everything that was happening in this episode that I hadn't even thought about my theory that I had once had. But in that moment, I went, well, I don't think he's Mordred now, because that wouldn't make sense to pull him back from the fiery pits of religious indoctrination and towards redemption just for him to end up being Mordred, the bad guy. And then he said it, Lancelot. Oh my god. Oh my god, I yelled. I'm not kidding here. This is not like when you're tweeting and you write, OMG, I'm screaming, but you're actually just sitting on your phone like this. No, no, no. I yelled out loud and threw my hands up because I was in awe. I have never seen a Lancelot done like this before. Usually Lancelot is just this dreamy, highly capable knight who gets swayed from his picture-perfect pedestal because he got the hots for a married woman or a promised woman, Guinevere, who we've still not seen, by the way. I'm very curious if they're going to introduce her later. But this version of Lancelot is so much more interesting, and I'm so glad that they didn't say in advance that he was playing Lancelot, because initially he was only listed online as the Weeping Monk. Now, if you look him up, of course, it reveals it, which is why I'm annoyed. But anyway, people browsing now will just see the spoilers, which is so unfortunate because I really enjoyed the journey of learning about this character's true identity and backstory organically without knowing in advance who he really was. And anybody who misses out on that, I think, is missing out on something really great. Of course, the other lead characters had more going for them consistently throughout the entire series, but just the way the Weeping Monk storyline picked up all of that momentum at the end, and then that big reveal, I am hooked. I am invested, and I need season 2. Let me know if you want video essays about Cursed, because I am very confident that the first one I would probably make is about the Weeping Monk. If I don't get season 2, I will be livid. Anyway, if you enjoyed this review, please like and comment because it really helps out my channel. Subscribe for more videos, and if you would like to follow me on social media, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, and Vero. Hopefully some of you made it this far. I know I had a lot to say, but I really liked the series, and these were just my initial thoughts. See you in the next one. Bye.